What even is an ethical vegan? Welcome to Activist. I'm Gareth.
And I'm Jackie. And someone who knows very well what an ethical vegan is and has been sharing it with the world is Jordi Casamitjana.
Jordi won a historic court case to establish ethical veganism as a philosophical belief and has also written a fantastic book, a fantastic resource on the subject matter. So today we'll learn from him all about ethical veganism. So if you enjoy this content, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, drop a comment below if you learned something from this. We certainly learned a hell of a lot from this, so we hope you enjoy it and learn from it as much as we did.
Jordi, thank you so much for being here with us today. You have said yourself that you have become known as the guy who changed history by being vegan. It's been over a year now since you won your landmark case. Congratulations. And it is still, after all this time, a hot topic of conversation. And you have also gone on to release this fantastic book, Ethical Vegan, which not only talks about your case, but also what it means to truly be an ethical vegan. So we're really looking forward to talking with you about both. Before you became known as the guy who did the vegan thing, as you talk about in your book, you were previously known as the Wasp Man and also the Monkey Man, but it was an encounter with a wasp which led you to look at the world differently and ask yourself, three questions. Who am I? What is this? And what should I do? It was a fantastic part of your book, reading about that encounter. And, could you elaborate on these questions for our viewers and how you arrived at those?
Okay, yes. The questions themselves is the questions that I've been asking myself all my entire life. But you think about it, is the question that everybody's asking themselves all the entire life, is the question that civilization has been asking itself. Even the animal kingdom, any animal that is born, the first thing that it does is, what's this? What is this? Who I am? How should I move? So they are the basic fundamental question of the animals of this planet. But I never articulate them as such until I wrote the book. It's when I wrote the book that I realized, hold on, these are the actual three questions I've been asking all my life, and I never spelled them out clearly. Because what happened with the book is a combination of three stories. It's intertwined. One is the story of veganism from the beginning to the end. The other is the story of my life, how I became a vegan, because there have been many things that happened in my life that contributed to me to becoming a vegan. And once I was vegan, they just keep going and becoming the actual vegan I'm today, which is different than the vegan I was yesterday. And the third is my case, how my case developed. And in fact, when I was writing about this, I realized that the beginning of these three stories matched these three questions. So the beginning of my life started with the question of who I am. The first time you cry, you're just there, not at the child wall. You have a brain, the brain starts to build that question constantly. You never find the answer. You keep building the answer through your life. My little case was the question of what is this? Because it all started with an email I received. And I asked myself, what is this? And I opened the email, and that started a 2 years litigation that ended up with the protection of veganism. And then we have the story of veganism. We have the story of my case. And then the other question is, what should I do? Which is basically the ethics. So all animals, we move. So we have the ability to decide what to do. And therefore, that was basically the third story of tell me about what is veganism, what is this behavior. So basically, the questions are universal, are the basis of all kind of conundrums in philosophies, if you think about it. But they become crystallized in three actual questions in my book. The only thing that my book does is kind of stops in my life, looks at who I am now, how I got to here, but it's not the end of it. Obviously, every day I'm building my next book, whatever it will be in 10 years' time. The three questions will still be asked, but the answers might be different.
I love that because, in your book, reading it, we hear from vegans all the time, that defining moment, and they connect with a cow or a sheep or a chicken or something that you normally eat. And that is that defining moment. But for you, it was a wasp, which is just so unusual. And it was fantastic that you were able to make that connection.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about the story of the wasp because it's one of the interesting stories.
Absolutely.
It's a surprise. But the point is, could be anything. It was a sentient being that had an interaction with me, and that doesn't matter which sentient being it is. But in my case, it wasn't a sheep, it was a pig, it wasn't a pig, it wasn't an elephant, it was a tiny wasp.
Well, as we sort of touched on, in your book, you give that fantastic, comprehensive history of the core of veganism. And once again, we don't want to delve too deep within this conversation because, folks, you got to read this book. It is fantastic. So we're not going to do all your homework for you. But veganism has exploded in popularity over the last few years, and it's quite often viewed as a new age lifestyle. It's something that's cropped up all of a sudden. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. We don't want to give away, as I say, too much of the book, but would you be able to give our audience just a little touch of this history of the philosophy and how far it goes back?
Sure. It goes back millennia. We don't really know how much. Probably, I explain also in the book that before even we have history and we have the ability to record what happened in the past, probably the whole concept was already brewing in animals that evolve into us. Because again, those three questions are relevant to the animals. What is this? Is a predator? Should we move away? What should I do? Is also a reaction of an animal. As long as you sentient being, you have senses that allows you to detect the world, and therefore you can ask, what's this? Because you have this is the world that you detect with the senses. And as long as you have a nervous system that processes this information, you will ask two questions. What is this external world and who I am? So that probably started those questions there. But at one point, the answer to the question, what should I do, was do no harm. I'm not going to harm anything, because it seems that if I don't, probably I'm going to be better at surviving. And that at one point became a concept in humans that were able to develop concepts. And we already have it in a word. It's called ahimsa. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word. Hims means strike. Himsa means harm. Ahimsa means do no harm, or the wish of doing no harm. And we find this word already well developed 500 years before the Common Era. But that was well developed, probably was created millennia before that. But at that time is when many religions that we find today started. Jainism, for instance, uses the concept of ahimsa very strongly. And Mahavira, this teacher, was using it 500 years before the Common Era. But he was the 24th teacher of the whole Jain tradition, so probably the first one millennia before him already used it. Siddhartha Gautama, contemporary of Magartha, created Buddhism. He's the guy that became enlightened and became the Buddha. He also used his interpretation of ahimsa. And the Ajivikas, another religion at the time that lasted for 10 centuries but then eliminated. So Mikhail Gosal was this disciple of Mahavira. He also used it. So, and this is just India. But then you will go to the Orient around the same time, millennia before the Common Era. There were the Taoists already talking about yin and yang and the respect of nature and sentient beings. And then in the Middle East, we have the Judaism, and this one sect, hardly people talk about it. There was the Essenes that were very vegetarian. They look at Adam and Eve story where they live a vegan lifestyle as the thing to imitate. So wherever you look, you saw that concept of doing no harm being developed and evolving through the centuries. And my book, what it does is start with all these places and then just see how this concept moves through geography and through time and never disappears. Sometimes it goes up in popularity, goes down, it evolves, it expands, it contracts, it changes the tone, and it becomes what we are today. But it's the same idea that the first animals that were looking around and say, what should I do? And one clever animal said, I better don't harm anything. It's the same one.
It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, and all too often we get a lot of sort of carnist approaches of, like they're eating meat because it's what we've done for so long. Well, we need to adopt this old approach, of, do no harm. It's not that we should be harmed. It's fantastic.
Exactly.
And it's so great to delve into this.
It's like the most natural thing in the world. It's a part of your book that I absolutely love, and there is just you know, you're a very, very visual writer. And from the moment I picked up your book, I can just picture everything so clearly, which I just love. You know, it's one of those books that you just can't put down. And for me, you know, I've been vegan for 4 years now. So I've considered myself to be a pretty staunch ethical vegan for most of that time. You know, the more you learn, the more it kind of defines your stance on things. But on reading your book, I realized that I still had so much to learn, and that there was so much more to being an ethical vegan than most people realize, even long-term vegans. And one of my favorite lines from your book, probably one of my favorite lines ever spoken actually, is directly under the question where it says, "What is an ethical vegan?" And you respond, "Tell me who you harm and I will tell you what you are." And I just love that, you know, I love that quote. I look forward to using that with a lot of people. But as someone who knows better than anybody, what is the definition of an ethical vegan?
Well, I would not say I know better than anybody. I know as little as everybody else, I would say. And we all have the ability to define veganism in the way we want to define it. There is no rule for that. I didn't. I just didn't create a definition that suited me. I used the definition I saw that already was existing that fit what I thought veganism, ethical veganism was, which is the definition of the Vegan Society. The Vegan Society that was created in the UK in 1944 developed this concept, these words, the first time that the word was used. The concept was already there for millennia, but the word was first coined then. And they defined it different ways with the core of ahimsa then, the definition, until they kind of settled in a definition in 1988. And it's the same one we still have today, they still have today. That's the one I use, which is basically a philosophy and a lifestyle that seeks to exclude, as far as practical and possible, all forms of animal exploitation and animal cruelty. All forms, not just those related to food or related to fashion, and all animals, not just the ones we like, not just the ones that are fluffy. So that definition is the definition of veganism. That is what an ethical vegan is. An ethical vegan is the one that follows the definition, original definition of the Vegan Society. You could use it other terms. You can say the original vegans, or the true vegans, or the full vegans. It doesn't matter. But why we need to have this adjective added to it if it's the actual definition of veganism? Because not long after the definition was created, many people started to acquire part of the definition, but not the full definition, just the diet. Let's say they were half vegans or a quarter vegans, but that doesn't sound good. So they just said, I'm a vegan. And people, they were not vegans, assume that that's what a vegan is. So at one point, obviously, we can't stop people using the word vegan as they want to use it. So the word is not kind of copyrighted in any way. So if people want to use it in this way, then it's up to us to add something to remind everybody what's the original definition. And that's where the word ethical was added. About the 80s. In the 80s is when we start seeing people saying, we need to use something on top of vegan to make sure that this concept is not diluted completely, and to be sure that the original definition is maintained. And that's where the word ethical was added. But in reality, it means a proper, truly original, real vegan, without kind of deprecating those that are not following the definition. They also define themselves as vegan, which is fine as long as we don't get confused with each other.
Yeah. Our next question was going to be, you know, why is further classification of veganism required? And you've already sort of answered it there. You know,
it makes total sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and why we need to differentiate between, you know, what I put as lay veganism, you know, sort of like the plain, and then ethical, you know, and as you say, it should really almost be the other way around. But yeah, it's a fantastic to look at it in that way, because in this movement, there's a lot of times when we sort of separate ourselves from others. And there is I suppose, a need for it in making sure that, you know, if we're following the true path of what do no harm means, the ahimsa. Ahimsa. I'd be stumbling a bit today, but it's fantastic.
It got me thinking about. You go.
Yeah, just let me say something, because it is the balance between being able to find the definition that fits you and to get a group of people that we all share the same way of manifesting veganism, and therefore we're going to give us an extra name, and not create something that is completely separate. So still share some values and some core understanding with others. They have a slightly variation. And you have straight edge vegans, and you have eco vegans, and you have all these different types of vegans. As long as we all agree that there is a commonality, that's what we call ourselves vegans in inverted commas. But that doesn't matter. It's not necessary that we have to eliminate diversity. I think diversity is good, because if you find a group that manifests veganism closer to the way you do it, you will feel more comfortable, you will feel better value veganism, you will struggle less, therefore you're going to stay vegan for longer. But you should not consider yourself the only vegan, or the right vegan, or the best vegan. So you should be welcoming another group that has found another way to interpret it, so there is more people who's going to join them rather than do. So therefore, more vegans in general will be out there, because they will be always the perfect type of vegan for them. So I think the balance between diversity and unity is what we're aiming here.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, isn't it? It's a great approach. And, you know, your historic court case fought for the classification of ethical veganism to be recognized as a philosophical I can't say
belief.
it now. We're having a stumbly there. Philosophical belief, which it is. What does this recognition now mean for ethical vegans, and how are we protected by law?
Right. Obviously, that only applies to the UK, because that's where that jurisdiction made that declaration. And in fact, not the entire UK, only Great Britain, because Northern Ireland is not included under the Equality Act, which is the law that was applicable in this case. So basically, the Equality Act is an anti-discrimination law that says that you have some protected characteristics. You cannot be discriminated in any way. You cannot be victimized for those characteristics. You cannot be harassed for those. And among those, one could be gender, the others could be sexual orientation, the other could be disability, etc. And there's one of them that it says philosophical belief, but it doesn't define what philosophical belief is, and it has that to distinguish it from religion, meaning a non-religious philosophical belief. And because it's not defined, then it requires a judge to go and assess each new belief that claims to be a philosophical belief to see if it fulfills all the characteristics that the law says to be protected. But once you have it, and that's what happened in my case, once it is accepted, you are protected essentially from discrimination. So nobody can treat you differently than anybody else because you're vegan. Nobody can discriminate you in any way. For instance, you are an employee, and then somebody has been given food that is suitable for them by the employer, but not you because you're vegan. You have the right to complain because you're being discriminated. Or uniforms. You're the one who have to buy your own uniform, and the employer gives the uniform to everybody else that are not vegan. So that will be unlawful too. But not just houses, sorry, not just businesses and work, also services, public and private services. A hotel that says, no, a sign, vegans not welcome, that will be unlawful in the UK now. Or a public service, a prison. If you're in prison, you need to have your vegan food, you're vegan, and you have the right now to demand it. Or hospital, for instance, you're a patient. So it covers a wide range of situations where vegans are normally involved and have to endure discrimination, and we just took it on the chin and said, oh, well, I have to cope with this. Well, now you don't have to cope with it in Great Britain. You can just demand equal treatment. And if the employer doesn't give it to you, or the bar attendant doesn't give it to you, you can go to court and probably win, because my case, what it will give you is the recognition that the philosophical belief of ethical veganism is no inferior than Christianity, Islam, feminism, being disabled, declare yourself as cisgender, whatever. That is already protected. It is at the same level.
It's absolutely fantastic, the work that you've done, and I can't wait for more countries around the world to take up the baton. Take up the baton, because I'd love to see that here in New Zealand. But all too often, you know, it seems like vegan activists are up against the law in trying to highlight injustices and create a vegan world. And it's brilliant what you've done, and I think it's an important point that we make to our activists out there. But the importance of us using these structures, these tools that are in front of us to create change in our own favor. How do you feel about this, using the law for activism?
Yes, I feel very strongly about it. My book is called Ethical Vegan, but the subtitle is a personal and political journey to change the world, because in the end, that's what we want. It's not about me. Veganism is one of the few philosophies that is definitely not only about you. It's part about you as well, but it's mostly about others, being others, other humans, other sentient beings, other creatures in this planet. So it's all about the collective effect of having this do no harm philosophy should change the world for the better for everyone. So how can you achieve that? Well, it's two ways. One is when each and every of us becomes an ethical vegan. It might take 20, 30, 50 generations to get even there, closer to that. The other is use the system. If you use the system, when you create laws, and suddenly it is illegal to kill an animal, even if only 20% of the people really don't want to kill it, still that law applies to the 100% of the population. You need to use the system. And the current system we have is a legal system based in laws and regulation and rules. Let's use them rather than fight against them and take far more time and generations to get to our vegan world, and during all this time, many million more of animals are suffering. Use the system to cut the time. And if you're clever enough, or you're lucky enough, like in my case, you can make big leaps forward if you use the system.
It's awesome. And I'm so glad that you did. You know, it's such a wonderful thing to achieve. And like you say, to do this for everyone, to create this for everyone. And when you were building your case to present in court, we understand you amassed 1,200 pages of evidence. That's incredible. What did those 1,200 pages consist of?
Well, there are two things I had to prove in the court hearing. It was a pre-hearing where my case basically was composed of different parts, but one part was a pre-hearing, actually about a year ago, the 3rd of January 2020, where the judge had to determine answer two questions. One is whether I was an ethical vegan, whether my belief is true, because I could just say it and not been true, and the other, whether ethical veganism fulfill all those characteristics that had been already established by law that all philosophical beliefs that are protected should fulfill. And therefore, that's what I had to prove. I had to look at each of those characteristics and see whether I could find evidence that veganism does fulfill them. But the first part is the one that occupied most of my pages, because I had to prove that I was an ethical vegan. That means that every decision I made in my life, since I've been vegan, was with veganism in mind. So anything I bought, any receipt that says, yeah, I bought shoes that were vegan, I had to produce it as an evidence. So I could show there was not just me eating vegan food, there was me buying clothes that were vegan, with me rejecting a hotel because they didn't have soya milk. Any conversation I had, which luckily I kept many of these started through my life, that could prove that 10 years ago I had an argument with somebody because about veganism, therefore that my belief is a genuine belief, because that's what the first condition that has to be fulfilled, that the belief is genuine. And because I was claiming that affects every aspect of your life, one of the conditions is that affects a substantial part of someone's life. So I had to prove that with my own experience. So a huge percentage of the pages was examples of my life of how I manifest my veganism. But the other part was about books, philosophy, about history, showing about ahimsa, showing what the history of ahimsa is, just to basically help the judge to realize that was properly following all the conditions. And in fact, it worked, because the first day of the trial, the judge had to spend the entire day reading my pages. There was no time to talk to anyone. And the next day, when I went there to give testimony, and I was just prepared to answer any questions, he asked none. He said, I already made my mind. I already read everything. I already know. And in that day, which is very unusual for an employment tribunal case, he gave the verdict on the same day. Because after reading all this, he realized, and actually he used this word, he was overwhelmingly convinced that veganism was indeed a protected philosophical belief.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
Like, to all the activists there listening to this and then wanting to get this happening in their country, yeah, take that advice. Make sure you have the records of these things happening, because it's one of the great things in this digital age of so many of us have these records of things going on in our lives. So for you folks out there who are going to be building your case next, please make sure you keep those records.
Absolutely. I have to jump in with another question here. Sorry. Just listening to you, it just makes me smile, you know, listening to your story. But did you ever imagine you would be doing this? You know, years ago, we've been reading in your book about, you know, your background. Did you ever imagine that you would be doing something so phenomenal for the vegan movement and being an author in this way?
No. Well, writing a book, yes. I always wanted to write a book about veganism. I never expected that in order for me to write a book about veganism, I had to lose my job, spend 2 years in litigation, and win the case. And then a publisher would approach me and said, yes, I want to publish your book, because that was what happened. So without this story, probably my dream might have never become a reality. But the story, what it did, is kind of forced me to write the book. But what I never expected is I was going to be fired. I never expected I was going to be the first person in court. I never expected I was going to win until I won, because there was kind of many things that had to happen, and I didn't have the money to pay the lawyers. And in the book, you could see all the obstacles I had to overcome. So, and they were all obstacles that easily I could not have overcome if Providence had not helped me, or actually many people did not help me. Many people support me in the case, and thanks of that, and my lawyers and everybody else involved. So, but I consider myself lucky. But in a way, once the case was finished, I knew I had a good story to talk, and I knew that now I could probably write the book I always wanted to read, because that's the main motivation. I was trying to find a book about different types of veganism, doesn't exist. About a book about the history of veganism, doesn't exist. A book about the vegan world, doesn't exist. And that's what I wrote. I wrote the book that doesn't exist, because that's the book I wanted to find.
In our last season of Activism, we spoke to Katrina Fox, and she said the point of, when you're looking for that book and it's not there, do it, write it. So yeah, it is fantastic.
Yeah.
We understand as well from your book, your early life, your parents taught you to resist. During your young years, you grew up under the oppression of a fascist regime. And do you think that's what really instilled you the urge to keep on fighting this oppression, what you're seeing now in your life and what you've seen previously?
Yes, I think the fact that my parents told me to resist, I'm Catalan, by the way, for those that don't know, and Catalonia in the 60s when I was born was under the occupation of Spain, and it still is under the occupation of Spain. At that time, though, Spain was represented by a fascist regime, now it's by another type of regime. But at that time, yeah, it was the actual environment rather than what my parents told me, because if they had told me differently, I still think that I would have become a vegan, because it was the environment of being oppressed that made it, rather than reaction to that oppression. Because what happens is when you're oppressed, you're growing up in that world, the world seems a temporary thing. So you see around people that you trust, that they are not happy with the system because it's not the right system. So you grow up with this sense that this system is not the right system. So it's up to you to either survive it or to change it, and which is basically what vegans do. Vegans realize, well, this system is not right. Let's go and change it one step at a time. I start to change my own behavior, but I hope other people will do the same. But it's easy to do that change when you already had them in your mind, when you were growing in a situation that seemed hostile to you. That's why people that are oppressed in any shape or form, I think they're more easily going to become vegan and stay longer for vegan, because they understand this notion that if the system is wrong, you can actually change the system. While if you live a very comfortable life where everything was right, you will be very scared of trying to shake the system. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why I kind of carry on and had this vision of the animals being oppressed as I am, because I by seeing or remembering my own feeling of oppression, I could sympathize quite easily with other creatures that were oppressed too.
Yeah, definitely, it makes sense. And it's been, your life is incredible and fascinating. You've been on quite a journey, and who knows where it will take you next. We've touched on this subject sort of slightly. People often liken veganism to a religion, and indeed, as we mentioned, we all have similar beliefs and an ideology, but you explain very well in your book, however, how this can't be. Would you mind sharing that insight with our viewers?
Yes, definitely veganism is not a religion, because, which is something I had to answer so many times from the press. The first time I went to public with this, immediately the press thought what I wanted to do is veganism a religion, and all the headline says the guy that wants to make veganism a religion. So I had to answer this question a lot. Well, first, legally, the philosophical belief that is in the Equality Act exists to make a distinction from religion. Otherwise, it would not have been the need for me to go through this process, because religions are already protected. Had veganism been a religion already, there was no need for a judge to go through it. That's the first evidence that it's not a religion. A judge only had to deal with non-religious philosophical belief in order to see if the conditions are fulfilled. But if you think about it, it hasn't really any of the elements of the religion. It doesn't tell you what happened after you die. It doesn't have any metaphysics about how the world is created. And people might have their own metaphysics that in which veganism is part of it, but the different vegan will have another one. It's not a shared metaphysics of interpretation of veganism. It doesn't have priests, it doesn't have monks, it doesn't have temples, it doesn't have rituals, it doesn't have Bibles or books or all these sort of scriptures that many religions are based on. So if it doesn't have a leader that you have to follow to believe whether animals are sentient beings, it's all based in the own evidence that you find. So it doesn't really have all these very classic things that almost all religions have, but it's very ethical. So, and that's the thing that is in common. Therefore, meaning that it tells you a behavior that if you all vegan agree, this is the behavior should be happening, and this is the behavior shouldn't be happening. So it's a common moral understanding of what's right and wrong that does have that in common with many religions. But the most strong evidence that is not a religion is that normally, if you join a religion, you have to abandon the other religions that you used to have before. And that doesn't happen in vegan. There are vegans that are Muslims, that are Jewish, that are Sikh, that are Jains. So you don't have to abandon your religion because you will find somewhere in your religion a way to manifest your veganism without having to change your understanding of the universe that happens after you die and all this, and the rituals linked to this. So it's clearly not a religion, but it's clearly a philosophical belief.
Well, thank you for that insight on that. To be honest, I always find it ironic when we get approached with that argument that veganism is a religion, when carnists, I feel that's more religious in their sacrificial lambs for their dinner plate and such. So, but one thing that non-vegans and even some vegans like to say is that nobody can be 100% vegan. What are your thoughts on this? And if it's true, what can we do about it?
And that's an interesting question, because the answer could be yes or no, depends what people mean to 100% vegan. If you mean what veganism is, veganism being a philosophy, of course you can be 100% vegan in the same way that you can be 100% feminist, 100% environmentalist, 100% Christian, because if you do have that belief 100%, that the belief means the belief of not wanting to harm anyone, of any sentient being. If you have the belief, you're not going to have half the belief or a quarter of the belief. But you have to make the distinction between the belief and the manifestation of the belief. The manifestation means the behaviors that you're going to change since you have this belief. And that will change from person to person, because not everybody has the same circumstances that allow them to have the same options to substitute something that wasn't vegan friendly with something that is vegan friendly. So you can quantify that, because if somebody says, look, I think I am 100% vegan, you will find somebody else that does more vegan things than you do. But perhaps you already done all the things that are available to you, considering the options that are in your repertoire of options that the life has given you. And you can't just compare your options with the options of somebody else in another country, from another culture, that perhaps have many vegan options, but yet the effort that this person is doing in avoiding animal exploitation is much greater than the effort that you're doing, because the only thing you have to do in a supermarket is move your hand from the normal milk to the soya milk, when the other person had to travel 20 miles to get the soya milk. Who is more vegan, the one that travels 20 miles or the one that moved the hand? You cannot quantify veganism in the same way you cannot quantify feminism or you cannot quantify environmentalism. You either have the belief or you not. And how you manifest it is up to your circumstances. And you should never judge somebody else because they manifest it differently than you do.
Yeah, that's so true. There's a lot of competitiveness almost, isn't there, which, we're hoping to talk about as well. But during your court case to establish ethical veganism as a philosophical belief, we understand a description was given of a day in your life. And it said how each and every action you take is carried out with your ethics in mind. And even if the world might never know of your most minor trespasses, you still always take the most ethical route. And all too often, the members of the vegan community, we face criticism and judgment from non-vegans for taking the long way around. We get labeled as being deliberately awkward or difficult, simply for wanting to live in line with our ethics. And we get told, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you eat that steak or a sausage, no one will know. In your court case, however, you prove that the little things do matter. Can you tell our viewers a bit about this moment and how every action that we take is of value?
Well, yes, it is of value because, again, if you understand veganism as a belief, you one of the things that you have to do when you have a belief is be coherent with it. And if you're not, even when nobody's looking, if you transgress that belief or do things that clash with it, you won't feel good about yourself. You won't be at peace. You won't be satisfied with these options. And this is really far more important than what other people think about what you're doing. So if you live a false belief, this is not a genuine belief. Belief is you are convinced. The belief is the same thing as a conviction. So it doesn't matter how you got convinced, but you're completely convinced that the behavior, the right behavior in the case of veganism is try not to harm animals. But yet, if you do ignore that when you're alone, that belief is not really convinced. You're not convinced. You just pretend you follow the belief. So that means in the end, you're only gonna be a vegan if you're satisfied with your own behavior. And it doesn't matter what you do for others. And if you satisfy with your own behavior, that's when you will be a vegan for life, because that's when you will be the judge, the only judge of your behavior, and the only one that will tell you, yeah, I put the effort, the necessary effort to find a solution. I didn't find it, but the effort was right, therefore I'm happy with what I done. Or the opposite, I was lazy here. I didn't look enough. I didn't read enough. And you always have to become a better vegan. You always have to assume that tomorrow you're going to be a better vegan than yesterday. So decisions that you made up to now can be improved. You can find better alternatives. You can learn more about the products. You can learn more about the connections of the products that you thought they were vegans and perhaps they're not. You can be better at explaining veganism. You can be better at respecting somebody else's veganism. So you have to be humble and always feel that there is a journey in yourself. You never arrive. You never got that line, I'm a vegan. No. If you think you're vegan, that means you haven't really got the belief you're quite right yet. You never have to feel that identity, that question, who I am. You never have to find the answer and just sit and that's it. You will be a different person tomorrow. You will be a better person. And if you're not aiming to be a better person tomorrow, you're kind of losing about self-esteem there. You're capable of being a better person tomorrow. Therefore, anything that you do in your privacy is as important as anything that you do in public. And that's what the judge recognized. And what the judge was reading my routine, that's how he started reading the verdict. Just took some examples of what I do in the morning and my breakfast in the shower. He was saying it with a subtext that basically said, what this guy does is important to him as is anything that a religious person does that is important to them, anything that a disabled person does is important to them. You cannot classify that understanding of a belief in a lower level than any of the other beliefs that are out there. Therefore, this is an important thing. This detail that is minuscule is an important thing. And I was welling up, I was getting very emotional when he was reading it, because I was thinking, look, it paid off. It paid off for me doing all these things in my life. Meant I didn't lie. I didn't have to go to court and say, I buy all my clothes that are not from animals, and perhaps I didn't. I didn't need to, because it was a genuine thing. I was a genuine person in doing it, and the judge saw that.
Oh, it's fantastic. And it's so true. I mean, you with your court case, with your pension fund, you could have just thought, well, okay, I don't like that, but everything else that I do in my life is vegan. I could just let this go. I don't like this, but it's a pension fund. What can I do about it? But you didn't do that. And what an incredible difference it's made.
Yeah, I will have to link in the description of this video, I believe it's called the Case Files podcast, and they talk about the court case and that moment especially. I loved hearing your lawyer, I believe it was, who was saying about how you shaved your beard in the morning with vegan electricity, one that wasn't coal powered or anything like that, and like just his joy of like learning about that as well. And it's such a wonderful moment. And yeah, we'll link that podcast because it's a great one to listen to get a bit more in depth in the court case, as well as reading the book too.
I think every vegan, no matter how long you've been vegan, I think there is something in here for every vegan to learn. It's just an incredible book. And if you're non-vegan, well, crikey, you're just going to be blown away. But vegans, you need this book. Everybody needs this book.
But when choosing the actions that we take, in the book, you describe the process of past, present, and future. When we make decisions in the present, we also need to make the distinction between the past and the future and the lessons that we wish to teach those involved in the subsequent actions. Can you share with us more of your insights on this process? I absolutely love this segment.
Right. Yeah. The thing about the book is the book gives you what I call the foundation of veganism by looking at the past. The past allows you to realize that this vegan thing that we all talk about It's been there for a long time. It is properly thought. It's got tested and modified and improved through the years. And that was always good because that gives you confidence and that you're good hands. This philosophy makes sense. Many people had agreed. But when you start to make decisions about your life and what you need to buy, you can also look at the past. You can also look how this product was made, who made it, what was the connection of animal agriculture or animal exploitation in the past. And then you can also look at the future. If I buy this product, I am contributing to make this sort of product more available in the future. Will other people start to imitate and sending a message that this is how the future customers will like the products to be? So you always have to think about past and present. And in decisions like this, the future is more important than the past, because the past, you can't change it, but the past will basically connect animal exploitation with anything if you go far enough. There's nothing that we do that if you go far enough or in time, you won't find a connection with animal exploitation. Therefore, it is a kind of impossible way to find products that are not connected. But if the practice, that the element that connected them are not longer practices today, that past connection is irrelevant. What is important is what is going to happen in the future. If I buy this product, will people carry on with those practices or will change the practice? So is the message that you send into manufacturers, to the people that are selling the products, by you buying them, that you like or dislike the methods they're using now, not the methods they were using by those who create the product or those before. Like any vegan wasn't vegan before, most vegans. It would not make sense to, if we want to create a world that is all vegan, kill all vegans because there were no vegans before. In the past, there were no vegans. Let's kill them all and let's create vegans from day one. So only people that have been born vegan should survive. Would not make sense. When you become vegan, how did you behave before is irrelevant. It's what you do now what matters. The same thing when you engage in a commercial transaction. What's the message now you're sending for the manufacturers if they're still connected with the animal agriculture? And you want to say, no, look, I have an alternative and a product similar than yours that is no longer connected to that story, even in the past was, but no, now. This is the one I'm going to buy. So because I don't like that you still hang with those links with animal exploitation. So the future is what you always have to think, not just the present, when you make a choice commercially speaking.
I love that. For me, it was really heartwarming and reassuring for me as well. I used to work in animal agriculture here in New Zealand. And, once I went vegan, that was very hard to live with. And, I always sort of say, I can't change my past, but I'm helping change the future. But I didn't really know whether I believed that, whether it was enough. But now, if I hadn't had that insight into the past, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't know to speak out about it, so I just love that part of it. I love many parts of your book, as Gareth will I'll be reading it and then stop him from what he's doing and read passages from it. And I love a quote from you which says, what unifies all ethical vegans is not their success in avoiding animal exploitation, but their effort in doing it, considering the circumstances, which, we've touched on a little. And in your book, you present the idea of pragmatism versus idealism. And we often see this being argued about within the many social media platforms that we have that our movement inhabits. And, at Vegan FTA, it's our belief that we all just need to stop the bickering and all the infighting between different, segments of the movement and just get on with saving the animals. And if a form of activism isn't your own preference, move on, just choose another and leave those who are fighting for the same cause or working towards the same goal. Just leave them alone and they're doing something in a different way, but we're working towards the same future. What are your feelings on this?
Yeah, I kind of agree because we don't know what works. We don't know. And everybody that tells you, I know what works, that probably is not true. There's no advance in progress in society that you can pinpoint a particular tactic, a particular individual, a particular group. Normally, it's a synergy of many factors that work in a particular environment that might never perhaps be replicated again because the environment might never be the same again. So you can't just know the tactics. So the only thing you know is that's the same thing in nature, that the more things you try that are slightly different, the higher the probability that one of them might work. That's the concept of biodiversity. You have an ecosystem with a lot of biodiversity, there will be better chance that if there is a change in the environment, some species survive. If there is a low biodiversity, perhaps there is a change in climate and everybody dies because there's not enough variability. Same thing with campaigning and trying to change the world. The more angles you use, the more styles you use, the more tactics you use, the more chances that some will work. So therefore, and there's no information out there that tells you which one works already. So therefore, the only thing you can do is to be content with whatever you want to do. You don't have to do what somebody else has done, but don't stop other people doing the things in their own way, unless obviously they are crossing the line. They are no longer working for the vegan world, they're working for the carnivore world. There will be obviously a limit, but within the same idea and the same strategy, I mean the same goal, the tactics we use is what we can play with and try and experiment and hope that the combination of all might get us to the goal. But we also have to be pragmatic. People want to find ways that are comfortable for them, and that's understandable. There are things they can do physically, there are things they can do more comfortable. For instance, I don't like the very aggressive activism. I'm not that kind of person. But I'm articulate. I like the intellectual ones. But that's me. I'm not. If somebody's angry, of course they're going to shout. But I try to control my anger. Other people might not be able to. Other people are sad. Then a visual it might be for them. So how can you control the emotions of other people? Therefore, there's no point just to try. So we should be happy that there are people doing things different than the way we do, still trying to aim the same goals.
Yeah, that's so true. And continuing on that topic of diversity within the movement, you made a point at the recent VegFest talk UK, VegFest UK talk, shall I say, in 2020 about how there's no such thing as a general population. So often we see the same arguments for veganism being given in so many different countries, in so many different cultures. But to be effective activists, how important is it that we tailor these messages to our surroundings and adapt it to the local culture we're within?
It's very important because you might have the same belief, but when you try to communicate the belief to another person, this process that we call communication is a two-way thing. Communication is you have an idea, you use a language, and you have an audience. And if there is a barrier that prevents that audience to understanding what you try to say, either because they don't speak the language you speak, or they don't understand the concepts, or you use words that affect them in a different way than affect you, that block them, that make them not wanting to listen to you anymore, you fail as a messenger. So if you want to be a campaigner, you want to change the world, you have to become a good messenger. And the best quality of the good messenger is to learn in a different language than the one you speak. So therefore, once you have the idea you want to transmit, and all vegans have the same idea, if it's the same way you express it for each culture, you know you're doing something wrong already, because you haven't made the effort to understand that what is the difference that you require to make that message as effective as possible, as understood as possible, with people that have a different way to understand sound, to understand concepts, to understand the combination of concepts in situations that you could not possibly imagine if you never experienced the life they had. So therefore, it is important if you become a campaigner professionally, even if you're not paid in the sense that that is your main goal, to transmit the message of veganism, your skill will be all about becoming a better communicator. And that skill will be all based about becoming better able to understand how other people different than you understand the things you want to say. So therefore, I think it is an essential thing to get to that vegan world sooner, because of course you can be vegan by yourself in a mountain, never talk to anyone, good. But if you aim to convince one person, you better speak the language of that person.
Yeah, that's so true. Very true, actually. That really resonates. And, it was a fantastic talk. And another point that you made during that talk was about constructing our movement through diversity. And throughout 2020, the topic of intersectionality within the movement was raised, especially during the Black Lives Matter protests and demonstrations against systemized oppression. Is intersectionality a key for the movement in order to grow stronger and become more effective in achieving our goals?
The answer is yes, a very strong yes. Keep it quiet, because intersectionality is really a framework, or is a prism, is a way of looking at things, but it gives you something that you didn't have before you use intersectionality. It gives you a better understanding of the reality of humanity. And of course, we were saying before about communication. If you understand humans better, you're going to be able to send the message better. You're going to be able to tailor the message better, and they will understand it more likely. So it would be ridiculous to have this tool that allow you to see how different factors intersect, how people are not just humans, are also men or women, or from this race or from that race or from this religion. So there are all these intersections in a single creature. If you just ignore everything else, you only look at 1% of that person, your message will be 99% wrong. In order to have 100% right message, you have to look at all the things that intersect in that person. So have this ability to intersect different movements will allow you to understand better and therefore communicate better. But also will allow you to mobilize people in a more effective way. If you get different movements that all try to improve the world in different ways, in different aspects, if you get them together, so we all unify our forces against the bad guys, the carnies, which tend to be the oppressors, and the carnies are the same bad guys for everyone, no matter which battle you're battling here. If we get together, we are more likely to achieve success sooner. So that means strategically, not just from the point of view of communication, strategically, it opens the door of a better tools to achieve the vegan world sooner. So why would just reject those tools and those understandings if you can improve your campaigning? Well, you only if you think they're going to make your life more difficult, because it will. If you have to consider more factors, if you have to use more tools, your life is going to be more difficult. So if you're a lazy activist that you just want to send a message, talk to the mirror, and hope that somebody in the street might listen to you, well, do that if that satisfies you. But if you're going to go beyond that, if you aim to achieve something more, better use all the tools that are out there. Intersectionalism is a good tool we always had, but only now in the recent decades is being kind of available for us to exploit in a better way that has been used before. Let's use it.
Yeah. I think one thing all of us need to adopt is collaboration into our lives. You know, it became, I took that word from Katrina Fox last year, as she said it was her word of the year. So I'm bringing it into my word of the year is collaboration. And yeah, collaborating with so many different movements, you know, means that we can form a stronger front in achieving our goals. But a little bit off topic, but a hot topic at the moment is cell-based meats. And it would seem that a plethora of companies are attempting to make eating meat more ethical, sustainable, and vegan marketable. I love what you said in, I believe it was actually the same interview, the VegFest UK talk, about cell-based meats being the best marketing tool for the animal agriculture industry because it promotes the idea that we still need meat. Can you share for our viewers your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, you kind of said it already. I'm against the concept, not only because I don't consider them to be vegan friendly, since there are animal ingredients in them. And not that long ago, it's not when we're talking about the past, we're not talking about an idea that was developed 5 centuries ago and now it's completely disconnected. It's something that's been developing right now. So therefore, if you want to send the message, don't use animal ingredients, well, these are the people that should be listening to you, because they're the people that are developing these new techniques right now. They didn't exist before. So this is just the reaction of a vegan not wanting to take these products because I don't consider them vegan friendly. But I dislike it for more reasons. I dislike it for the negative effect that will have generally to our movement, because I think it will delay that process of getting that vegan world. Because what it does is basically legitimize the concept of meat. What we need is to move away of the forms and colors and shapes of animal exploitation, not to replicate them, not to make them look so similar that we don't really know now anymore whether this product is from animal origin or not, because we made them so similar until the point this is actual meat, that's actual animal cells, that no longer you can trust anybody that says, yeah, you can eat this, it's vegan friendly. Well, but it's still meat. Yeah, but trust me, it's vegan friendly. How can you trust? So I want all the products that are vegan friendly very different to the ones that are not. And therefore, anything that gets you closer to retain these concepts of meat, and even I don't quite like the purely plant-based burgers and sausages that there are no animal ingredients at all, but they look so similar to the real thing that I can't tell the difference. I don't like that because I want to tell the difference. I want to tell the difference between right and wrong. I want to tell the difference between exploitation and non-exploitation. So, of course, who will be those that don't want us to see that difference? Well, the companies that produce the bad products, the meat companies, the milk companies. So, you see, I'm one of those that when there was all that debate that says perhaps milk, soya milk should not be called milk, or cheese, soya cheese should not be called cheese. I was quite happy not to be called milk or cheese because that will make us in the future easy to ban cheese, easy to ban milk. When we get to that policy moment, when we have enough of us that we can elect enough members of parliament so we can start passing laws that might ban bacon and might ban cheese, well, it will be quite difficult if we all use the word cheese for both animal and non-animal ones. It will be easier if we don't. So I think from a strategic or tactical point of view, it is something I don't promote, but I understand why it's out there. And if it helps these days people to become vegan for a while, at the first month, well, good for that point of view. But I hope that they will move away from them once they've been vegan rather than get stuck with a vegan meat concept that is the thing that we have to eliminate from people's consciousness.
That's a fantastic insight. And I know already, for a lot of Cannis restaurants, stuff like that, there's already a lot of things they say, oh, this is organic grass-fed beef, but then really it's the most industrially farmed stuff. So there's already that within those sort of circumstances. And then, it's a scary thought for us vegans to then being put into that situation where we think we're doing something ethical, and it's not because people are being lazy or cheap with things, and they're, pawning it off as others.
Plus, we already get asked, don't we, already with the plant-based, the soy alternatives or the pea protein alternatives, why do you always want your food to look like meat, I mean, it does go the other way. Why do you want your cow to look like a burger? But that's something that we get. So it's not going to help that argument, is it? I
would like to also point out in our first season of Activist, there is a speaker, Serena Farb, and she shares a little bit on cell-based meats and the production of them, being a biologist. So for any of our viewers who want to know a little bit more about what really goes into some of the productions, there's some great videos on there. So check that out in our season 1 of Activist.
Certainly, I'm right with you, Jordi. I wouldn't want to touch that stuff in a million years, but everything's got its place right at the moment, as long as we're going in the right direction. We could quite happily talk to you all day, but finally, for those of our audience members who want to move forward with becoming ethical vegans, what steps can you recommend? What's a good starting point for someone wanting to live a more ethical life?
Right. I think the first step to take is start with the belief. Don't start with the behavior. The behavior is irrelevant without the belief. The belief is what matters. So you don't have to tomorrow start not using animal products. If you don't know why you're doing this, you need to know why you're doing this. Talk about veganism with others. Read about my book or any other book. Understand why you're doing this, and then apply it in your circumstances, one step at a time, as long as, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself so much to the point that you think it's going to be too difficult. It's not difficult. It's only difficult if you make it difficult. But if you don't have a belief to back you up, it will look more difficult, because every small change that you make in your life, it will be incredible, dramatic change that you think you won't be able to cope. But when you think about why you're doing it, it will become such an easy thing to do. So the belief is the important thing. Understand what a sentient being is, understand what exploitation is, understand what a speciesism is, why you cannot discriminate from one species to another, all these basic concepts that I discuss in my book. Once you understand that, everything becomes easier. And then start with the food, which is easy, move to the clothes, which is also easy, and just never stop. Never find a appointment that says, I already done it. Assume every year that you're going to get better to the next one. Every year, my New Year's resolution is asking myself the question, what else this year I'm not going to consume that I consumed up to now? Try to find more things to not consume, because we consume so much stuff. We live in this society, we consume too much stuff that we don't really need. And one of the things that veganism give you is this opportunity to look at your own habits. Therefore, when you have that opportunity and you decide yourself to start changing, well, use it well. Not go beyond animals, go to the environment, go to the things you don't need, because then you'll be more fulfilled. The fewer things you need, the fewer things you missed, and the fewer things you need, the fewer things you lost. And so that is always a good strategy in life. So, and keep moving, keep never finding that you're really right, and enjoying the journey, enjoying any decision you make. Rejecting animal exploitation should be a moment of rejoy. The first time I was vegan, the first years, what I used to do is I used to go to supermarkets and read the labels of products, which I already knew they were not vegan, but I read the label so I could reject the product. And I loved the actual action of rejecting the product. I was in control of my life in the first time. And that is a positive feedback that together with the philosophy will make you vegan for life. And that's what we need. We don't need vegans for a month. We need vegans for life.
Thank you for watching this episode. If you'd like to support our speaker, then follow the links provided in the description. If you're enjoying this content, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave a like on our videos or drop a comment with something that you've learned. Your love and support means the world to us, and we thank you all for watching this.